Greetings. Thanks to everybody for coming out to our group author reading. This reading is brought to you by Strong Women, Strange Worlds, which is a group of authors supporting authors. Our mission is to elevate the voices of women and non-binary authors of science fiction, fantasy, and horror through events like our bi-monthly virtual QuickRead sessions. You can find out more about Strong Women, Strange Worlds in the handout we've provided in the chat, or we will have provided in the chat real soon now, and by visiting our website, a link to which will be added to the chat at strongwomenstrangeworlds.weebly.com. I'd also like to take a moment to thank those who have made a tip jar donation. We really appreciate it. I'm your host today, Sarah Smith, and you can find out more about me in the provided handout as well. Please note that recording of this session by the audience is not allowed, and recording of electronic communications, including Zoom meetings and webinars, without permission is illegal. We will have recordings of all of these readings available to you, so just sit back and relax. Today we'll be featuring 6 authors: Felicia Martinez, Justine Manzano, Jen Mierisch, Ancrum Kayla, Christy Climenhage, and Angel Leal. Each author will have 8 minutes to read. Ready? Here we go. Our first reader is Felicia Martinez. Felicia Martinez is a writer and artist from eastern New Mexico, though the San Francisco Bay Area is now home. Find her words at Amaze, The Razor, The Acentos Review, The Deadlands, and others. She is the author of The Other Lives of Altagracia Sanchez, available now from Querencia Press. Felicia, take it away.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you so much to everyone at Strong Women, Strange Worlds for having me. It's really a privilege to be here. So today I am going to be reading an excerpt from my forthcoming novella. I'm actually not supposed to say too much about it, but I did get permission to read from it today. It's called Bright, and it's a multiverse retelling of the tragic tale of Phaedra and Hippolytus. But I've reimagined it as an ace love story. And it's also a story about a son dealing with the unbearable loss of his mother. It's written as a series of digital journal entries that cross universes. And in what I'll read for you today, Phaedra, from some unknown mythic past, will introduce us to Hippolytus from her point of view. And we'll start out with a very brief entry from her son, Acamas. So let's get to it. Bright journal entry. Acamas Prince. The present. I don't know if this story has happened before. I don't know if other universes touch our own or stand astride of us. I can't be sure of what's only fiction, what's merely real. These words are hers, that I know. The heart of a symbol, the soul of a myth. I fear these things because I doubt. I doubt that they'll be enough to carry what I need you to understand. And I need you to understand. This is my mother's story. Even she feared it would not be enough. Post scheduled. Bright journal entry. Phaedra, the past. It is said that the word for desire and the word for asking questions have the same root. Eros, eroton, passion and the pursuit of truth. I do not know why this is the connection that sits with me here in my final moments. I who loved so much and questioned not enough. If he were here, Hippolytus ever blunt, would remind me that an honest question, one pursued in good faith and with a hope of reaching genuine clarity, the kind I needed to ask, takes courage, yes, but is also an offering. Every true question has two souls, Phaedra, he once said, his black eyes unsteady as they strove to hold onto mine. One soul seeks, but the other shares itself, unveiled, and the two intertwine. As our hands never did, not even that, I want this to be very clear. In the early days of our meeting, perhaps I'd hoped, not achingly, but in the way I always felt about anticipated pleasures. Eager, unreserved. Intemperate was his father's word for my many enthusiasms. Open-hearted, Hippolytus insisted instead. Sure and direct. A confidence I once mistook for arrogance, I admit. These things you will know of him. Ardent follower of swift-arrowed Artemis, chaste, thoughtlessly so. Son of Hippolyta, warrior queen, and of godlike Theseus, my now king. Hippolytus, my stepson. We have seen the same number of summers, he and I. Not tall, but neither is he short, a median inherited from his broad-shouldered father. His voice is soft, his words few. I have long since learned that outward speech is difficult for him, no matter his many orations on marriage, on the supposed ignobility of love, no matter the claims of his father. He does not sit easy with his princely power. He wishes, above all, to dwell undisturbed with his own deep-running reserve. This I do not doubt. Still, to know is delicate, uncertain. These faces of friendship, of love. One's every attitude, one's every moral orientation can appear to be something baser, less exemplary than itself. Kindness can look like mere timidity, caution like indecision, humility a kind of fear. And what's to tell us which is which? It isn't the mask of us that decides. Of that I am certain. Though it does not help that Hippolytus's outward mien is marble, as smooth as thick-set ice. His is a manner arrested, reserved. And yet when he runs, engaged in some headlong race or flying fleet-footed in pursuit of his horses, he is as one possessed, his caution utterly broken, his whole countenance vivid and alive. Oh, to see him then! He becomes like the sunlight on rolling waves, bright and unfettered, all restraint stripped away. To read him then is to try and catch the light itself. Fire or ice, and neither easy to grasp. And yet when he stops, his breath an earthquake, his eyes turning upon me. It is in such moments that I know what it is to be pinned down by sight alone, singled out by deep-set eyes ever shifting, and as black as the deepest nights on Crete, at that time when the air becomes a riot of eddies from the wind upon the great hill. A gaze of shuddering stone. A gaze like Hippolyta's, his mother, true daughter of Ares and frequent visitor at Troezen, my now king's home. A woman who turned not just any king away, but Theseus, and still maintained her people's peace. With her alone did admiration overtake Theseus' self-importance, at least for a time. It was Hippolyta who was the first to look at her son and I narrowly, to wonder at our time together, to question us with her vivid attention, so like his. How could I explain to her, to myself, what I did not then understand? When love beyond family meant either friendship or sensuousness, with this new shade of attachment still so unclear. When Hippolytus himself never spoke of the turmoil, I could only suspect that he too felt. This I know. Love does not ask one's opinion, does not explain. When it comes, the best you can do is try and trust yourself. And that means facing who you are, who you have become, without judgment or reprisal. It can feel impossible, But let me tell you, you will come to know your soul laid bare and nowhere to hide. So you must hold forgiveness at the ready and gentleness like a balm. For love is light. It is an incredible refulgence, unfathomable and bright, and its brilliance changes everything. Though it does not wheedle or beg, it does not even aspire. It simply is. But I was speaking of Hippolytus, post-scheduled. So that was the excerpt, and I have 10 seconds. So I'll just say thank you all so much for being here. Follow me on social media to learn more about this, and please do enter the giveaway. You have many more wonderful readings coming up.
Thank you so much, Felicia. It was lovely. Our second reader is Justine Manzano. Justine Manzano is the author of the YA urban fantasy series Keys and Guardians and YA contemporary novel Never Say Never. She lives in the Bronx with her husband, son, and chaotic puppy. She is a freelance editor, activist, and proud geek. Take it away, Justine.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's really great to be here. I will be reading today from The Skeleton Key, which is the second book of my Keys and Guardians series. Because you're joining in the middle of a series, I'm just going to give you a couple things you need to know to set the stage here. Our emcee, Jacqueline's lover, Kip, was just thrown into a rift between dimensions that is spewing out monsters into our world. In a split-second decision, Jax decides to jump in after him, using the person who threw him, Lavinia, our villain, as a human shield. Also, the word Aegis means the selection of powers that each character has. For a moment, there was just space, nothingness. And then there was the chill of the thin membrane between us and the dusk. Then there was falling. I wrapped my arms tightly around Lavinia's waist as I fell. If I was going to fall into the dusk, I was going to use Lavinia to cushion my fall. A faint sucking sensation pulled me through the tear, and down became up, and up became down, and I was propelled into the air like I was shot out of a cannon. The shift in gravity ripped my human cushion from my hands, sending Lavinia flailing into the air beside me. I twisted my body, landing just like I'd been taught, not by the teacher beside me, but by the father she'd forced to hide from me for most of my life. When I landed, I bent with it, rolling over my shoulder and back onto my feet to burn off some of the momentum. Lavinia's landing was much rougher than mine. She already bled from several wounds inflicted during her battle with Kip, and while she tried to stop herself, she hit the ground with a crack. If it was anybody else, I would have winced in sympathy, but it was Lavinia, so I didn't. A storm of sirens marched in the direction of the rift, dressed in leather and armor, chest plates and gauntlets that appeared to be made of something similar to chainmail. The rift, despite all laws of physics, was cut into the ground of this place, too. The sirens carried torches, a blessing since the sky in the dusk was an immaculate silken black, uninterrupted by starlight or any other blemish. Gorvins loped behind them, and through it all, there was not a single sign of Kip as far as my eyes could see. What if he hadn't been able to get away from all of the interdimensionals? He couldn't have been fully eaten, could he? In that short of a time? My heart pounded. I was lucky to even be alive. What if it was like space here? What if I couldn't breathe? If the air was toxic? I cut myself off before the panic took hold. I had already made my choice, and it had been the right one, no matter how risky. I had to get out of there before the interdimensionals got any closer. A quick glance around revealed a dark shape to the left. The outline looked like a shelter of some kind. I could hide behind it. Dropping to my hands and feet, I tried to mimic the way a Gorvin ran. If the darkness didn't cover me, perhaps it would at least help camouflage me for one of them. One problem? Moving away from the fire made it increasingly difficult to make out my surroundings. No matter how good my vision was, it didn't work in the absence of light. And that's what the dusk was, a complete absence of natural light. As I got closer to where I thought the shape was, I held my hand out to try to determine my surroundings. My palm connected with something that had softness and give. My fingertips skimmed along it to find sharp points and lines. Whatever it was, it smelled like petrichor and rustled when I touched it. A bush. Holding my hand out, I crawled forward, the rough, uneven ground scraping along my knees and elbows. I followed the line of what had to be branches and leaves until it ended. Hopefully that break in the leaves meant I could crawl behind it and hide. I turned, and my hand landed on what felt like a pebble. I barely suppressed a hiss of pain, as it nearly broke the skin of my palm. Silence was key. If I could manage not to draw any attention to myself, I could put enough distance between myself and the army of interdimensionals, and I'd have time to regroup. Don't breathe too loud. Damn it, heart, don't beat so loud. Finally, I made my way around the bush and kept crawling, my hand in front of me, putting every other sense to work to make up for the lack of vision. I kept going until my hand brushed what had to be cool stone. I leaned my back against it, half expecting it to be the carapace of another Cenefestrian, because that was my luck, really. It wasn't growling, and it wasn't drooling on me, so it was as safe a bet as any. Channeling my Aegis, I warmed my hand to a simple glow. Or that's what I intended. Instead, my hand flared in a full flame. I doused it quickly, but winced. That would attract unwanted attention if anyone happened to be looking. My Aegis felt stronger here. I readjusted and tried for the warm glow again. I could see. I was in the center of a rock structure. A man hid further along the outcropping, a little closer to the action. He was too tall to be Kip. An Arvakian? I squinted to make out the features. The light helped when coupled with my Aegis. It was still difficult, but it was getting easier. This area of the world had a strange spattering of star-like gashes in the canopy of sky. How that could be, given it was the same sky here as it had been over there, I had no idea, but that wasn't a mystery I was going to figure out right now. Maybe it was part of the dimensional bleed. I leaned out a little farther. Hopefully, he wouldn't be able to see me any better than I could see him. A hooded cloak hung heavy over his shoulders. It was a chocolate brown, like the rock formations around him. He turned, scanning the distance. His eyes glowed an ominous gold, probably an evolutionary advantage needed to live here, or a disadvantage. I would imagine he would be pretty easy to catch with eyes like that. And then they lit on me. He yanked something from his pocket, and I took off. Wasn't waiting around for him to catch up with me. Who knew what side this guy was on? The ground here was spongy, and it took me a minute to get the traction I needed to build momentum. I'd barely gotten a few dozen feet before something jerked my feet out from under me. I hurtled forward and landed in a field of pink and yellow flowers that almost looked like chrysanthemums. I flipped to face the man, fire blasting from my palms. He struggled to catch up with me. He closed the distance by catching my feet with some kind of makeshift bolus. I set the rope aflame, freeing myself before turning my palms back in the stranger's direction. Halt your flames. A rough voice sounded within my mind, and I flinched. With no real effort, this man had nudged aside the protections I had erected in my mind. Have you and yours already done enough? You're destroying the rennet blooms. I'll stop burning crap when you get the hell out of my head. I held a flaming hand to the blooms. This is the only way we can understand each other. We do not speak each other's language. I'm not asking you to stop burning fecal matter. His thin lips twisted. I'm asking you not to burn the rannoch blooms. Right. I guess that made sense. He blinked. Are you looking for the other? Technically, two others came through, a woman and a man. I'm looking for the man, but I should find the woman. She is dangerous. I accompanied each mentioned person with an image in case genders differed in this world. You bring us your dangers? You're one to talk. I projected images of Gorvin, Sirens, and the Cenefestrian. That was not our doing. And this was not ours. The woman is our enemy. She harmed the man. I injured her and followed them in to save him. Sure, it was a little fib, but Lavinia had created the situation that brought her here, so it was also a little true. Semantics. His cat-like eyes narrowed. Right. He knew exactly what I was thinking. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can learn more at my website. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm delighted. Today I'm going to be reading the first part of my story from this anthology called Redline. You also got a picture of it there. Redline Chicago Horror Stories that just came out last week, and it features 20 stories, including mine, by people who either live in Chicago currently or grew up here. It's a great set of stories. There's a lot of darkness, madness, monsters, and then there's mine, which is, I would say, campy horror with monsters. So with that, I will read the first part of The River's Revenge. Suki leaned against the side of the canoe and trailed a fingertip through the cold, dark water. So, Ron, she said, how many bodies are at the bottom of this river? Ron paused rowing to frown at Suki. Bodies? She smiled and flipped her black hair over one shoulder. Chicago was a gangster town, right? The bad guys must have dumped corpses in here, cement shoes and all that. What do you think, a couple hundred? 0, Ron replied dryly. The river's been dredged a few times since the 1920s. Sandy-haired, bespectacled Ron was cute in a Clark Kent sort of way. Watching his lean arms haul the oars all afternoon had reinforced Suki's opinion. He couldn't have been more than 5 years older than she was, but Ron didn't seem receptive to her flirtation. He had already looked back at their trap map. Suki was lucky to have this urban ecology internship. She was delighted to be spending her spring term with the Friends of the Chicago River organization. Even if this particular friend seemed to find her more annoying than interesting, she hadn't yet managed to get Ron to crack a smile. The boat glided beneath the Kinsey Street Bridge as they made their way north toward Goose Island. Skyscrapers towered above the waterway, giving rivergoers the impression of traversing a steel and glass canyon. Bright May sunshine glittered off the windows and scattered across the calm, deep green water. 2 rowers in bright red kayaks waved as they paddled by. It's great that the river's been cleaned up, said Suki. I read about how polluted it used to be. I bet the fish had some freaky mutations back then. Ron shrugged. We're up to 70 fish species now. I still wouldn't swim in it. The canoe fetched up next to a cluster of rotting wood pylons draped with rusted chains. Here. Ron handed Suki the oars, grabbed a hold of a chain, and pulled the boat alongside. What about the beaches on the lake? I can swim there, right? If picturing her in a swimsuit didn't faze Ron, Suki was officially giving up on flirting. Yeah, but I wouldn't do it until at least August if I were you. Water's too cold. He raised an eyebrow. Where are you from again? Knoxville. Ron donned a long rubber glove, reached beneath the water, and pulled up a trap. Here you go, Tennessee. Your turn to weigh it. A nickname? Was that progress? Suki suppressed a smile as she put on her gloves. She hoisted the dripping trap, set it on the floor of the boat, and did a double take. Whoa! The semi-opaque plastic revealed a silhouette of the creature inside. It was too large to be one of the blue-spotted salamanders they were tracking. Is this a snake? Sometimes bluegills get in there, Ron said. Just crack it open and release them. Suki unlatched the clasp and removed the lid. Wow, she said. Anguilla rostrata. I thought these guys were super rare in the Chicago River. The animal writhed and squirmed in the tight space, too small for its serpentine body. Its slimy skin was mottled olive and yellow-brown like dead winter grass. A head with beady red eyes poked out from the tangles of flesh. Hang on, said Suki. This thing's head looks too big for an eel. And check out the size of those pectoral fins. Ron rubbed his chin thoughtfully. With that color, it should be a juvenile, but that's at least 4 feet long, and they're supposed to be nocturnal. What you doing up early, buddy? Suki gently poked the creature's tail. The reaction was instantaneous. The eel's head reared up through the top of the trap. A second head appeared next to the first, attached to the same neck. Both heads faced Suki, bared their teeth, and hissed. With startling speed, the heads shot forward. Razor-like teeth closed around Suki's thumb. She shrieked and pulled her hand away. The animal surged from the open trap and landed with a wet crash on the boat's fiberglass floor. It slithered in an arc and darted for the half-eaten hot dog left over from Suki's lunch. In seconds, the creature shredded and swallowed the pink meat. Holy shit, said Suki. Yipe! The eel had darted for Ron's feet. He hoisted his legs into the air. The eel plowed into a paper wrapper and devoured the remains of Ron's Italian beef sandwich. We've got to catch it! Suki seized the eel around its middle. It slipped out of her hands, raised its front half as if flying, and wrapped its body around the canoe's stern side yoke. Open that trap and get ready to shut it! Ron reached for the eel's neck, but its heads swayed back and forth, eluding his grasp in a game of cat and mouse. He removed one glove and wiggled his fingers a foot away from the twin heads. Suki's stomach dropped. Ron, she said, what are you doing? 4 red eyes focused on Ron's waving fingers. Finally, unable to resist, the heads shot forward. In a single swift motion, Ron pulled his fingers away and seized the eel's outstretched neck with his other hand. Gotcha, he said. Tennessee, incoming! Suki held the trap open and braced herself to catch the animal's weight, but Ron was having trouble with the spitting, struggling eel whose tail remained wrapped around the beam. When his poking and prodding proved futile, Ron grabbed the tail with his bare hand, wrested it free, and gathered the eel's flailing body against his own. He leaned forward over the trap and dropped the animal inside. Suki stuffed the lashing tail in, slammed down the lid, and locked it. Wide-eyed, they looked at each other and caught their breath. Ron sat and wiped sweat from his forehead. Suki flapped the hem of her t-shirt to fan herself. The trap shook as the confined creature thrashed angrily inside. Did it bite you? Asked Ron. Suki peeled off her torn glove. No, I'm good. Hot damn, Ron, I know this town's famous for some strange critters, but Chance the Snapper has nothing on this guy. Ron shook his head in awe. I've never seen an eel move that fast out of water. Those jaws and teeth are at least 3 times the usual size, and the way it curled itself around that bar? Eels don't have the musculature for that kind of grip. True, Suki agreed. And then there's, the extra head. That too. We've got to tell someone. Right, Ron brightened. We'll show the team. It might be a new subspecies. Maybe we'll get to name it. No, Ron, we've got to tell the authorities. This thing is dangerous, and it's obviously hungry. What if there are more of them out there and they attack someone? Oh, Ron had the decency to look sheepish. We passed a police boat near the bridge, said Suki. Let's turn around and flag it down. No, said Ron. We should take the eel back and let the team have a look. Maybe it's something they've seen before. They'll know if we need to involve DNR or anybody else. I don't want to raise unnecessary alarms. Suki opened her mouth to object. It seemed wrong not to tell the police, but she was the junior member of this expedition, and perhaps the boat had been rocked enough during their eel wrestling match. She should learn the protocols, and it would make Ron happy in the process. We might get to name it, huh? Suki said. How about Wrigley Field? Was that a smile? I'm thinking Muddy Waters, Ron said. No, wait, I've got it. Eel Capone. Ron groaned and reached for the oars. Thank you.
Our 4th reader is Kayla Ancrum. Kay Ancrum is an author of award-winning contemporary YA, notably The Wicker King, Darling, and the critically acclaimed Icarus. Kay is a Chicago native passionate about diversity and representation, in young adult fiction. She currently writes most of her work in the lush gardens of the Chicago Art Institute. Kay, you're up.
Hi. I thank you so much for coming. I actually have a reading from my newest book, The Corruption of Hollis Brown. My editor said that I had to read this one. I'm sorry, everybody. The Corruption of Hollis Brown is a horror novel, and it is about a kid who gets possessed and then falls in love with the ghost possessing him. I am reading from a passage from right after he gets possessed, like seconds after. 10 years ago, Hollis had broken his arm. He'd been climbing a tree, stepped on a dead branch, and fell like a comet to the ground. He could still hear the echo of the crack. There he lay on his back in the grass, in agony so sharp his brain filled with static. He knew he must be seeing the trees above him, blue sky, white clouds. But the pain was so large he was blind with it. Only red, orange, and black remained as he was pulled from the ground and rolled into his father's truck. Horror was the same. Intellectually, he knew he was screaming. He could surmise what had happened and guess at what sort of creature Walt was. He could see the world lurching forward as they jolted towards his house, spared a bit of scientific curiosity about what sort of thing had happened with his very human body Walt had previously been wearing. But at the front, drowning out everything, was fear. Animal and instinctive, gnaw your arm off to free yourself sort of stuff. But Hollis couldn't even gnaw. He couldn't do anything but scream and think. Walt had walked him home that first night, waited until he put his key in the door to make sure it was his house, asked about his friends, family, and behavior, said, "That's good to know." Food and shelter, Walt said. Hollis had never asked what kind. He never thought he needed to. Maybe Walt was going to eat his body. Maybe that's what he did to that other guy, sucked him dry until he was so brittle. Hollis remembered the foot and the crisp sound of its separation. Another wave of nausea hit him so bad that it made Walt stop and lean against a fence to catch his breath. I eat normal food, Hollis. That other thing had nothing to do with eating, Walt panted. Quit trying to make us throw up. Hollis hated that Walt was using his voice. It made him roar in anger and beat himself against the inside of himself. Walt sank to the ground and wrapped his arms around his chest. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. A feeling of calm settled over them, disorienting and unwanted. Furious, Hollis twisted the exact way Walt told him not to, and Walt stopped what he was doing immediately. Fine, Walt said, Walt's inside voice again, and that accent. Walt picked up the pace. He walked up Hollis's stairs like he did this every day and rummaged Hollis's keys out of his pocket. He opened the door and closed it sharply behind him. Where did you go? Hollis's mother called. To Hollis's despair, she was waiting up for him again at the kitchen table. Walt turned Hollis's body and walked it inside. Take off your shoes, Hollis howled. Walt bent and began undoing Hollis's laces. I felt a bit stir-crazy, Walt said to his mom, so I just went around the neighborhood. It's only been about 20 minutes. Hollis's ma got up and opened the cabinet. She pulled out a mug and filled it from the pot sitting on the stove. Here, take some milk with you to bed. It's too cold to be wandering around so late, she said softly. Hollis flinched as his mother kissed Walt on the side of the head and placed the mug in his hands. He wanted to push her away, warn her, shout, fight, anything, but he couldn't. He couldn't. Walt took the mug and used Hollis's face to smile. The disgust was too overwhelming for Hollis to continue his instinctual scream. He was shocked into silence as Walt walked his body up the stairs. Walt took a few steps towards Hollis's parents' bedroom, then paused, turned Hollis's body around, and chose the correct door. He shut it behind them, placed the mug on Hollis's desk, and took off his coat. Then Walt closed Hollis's eyes and breathed in deeply. This room doesn't smell nearly as rank as most other guys' rooms. Could be cleaner, though. Your ma seems nice. Spend a lot of time in teenage boys' rooms, you pedo? Hollis couldn't control his mouth. I'm 17, Walt replied. Kind of. Choosing people around the age I feel is more comfortable, so yeah, I have endured a lot of rank-smelling rooms, and I can't just immediately clean them up. People get suspicious. Walt took a sip of the hot, sweet milk and ran a curious finger over some of the books in Hollis's cheap Walmart bookshelf. You seem calmer. That's good. It will pass, Hollis snapped. Hollis could feel the muscles in his face shifting into a smile again, and it made his skin crawl. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. Walt scrubbed a hand over the back of Hollis's neck and stopped talking to him. He just sat in Hollis's desk chair and finished his milk as Hollis shouted obscenities at him inside. Then he stood up and took a deep breath. Here we go. He left Hollis's room and headed for the bathroom. Walt shut the bathroom door, turned on the light, then looked in the mirror. He ran his hands over every inch of Hollis's face, touched his bushy eyebrows, the freckles that covered his cheeks and chin, ran his fingertip down the curve of his nose and tapped the bump on its slope gently. He pressed a thumb to Hollis's lips, dragged across them in a burst of sensation, and Hollis began to weep, overwhelmed. Walt made a soft hush noise, but Hollis cried harder. He couldn't help it. Walt looked inside Hollis's mouth at his teeth, lifted his tongue, fingered the back of his throat to text his gag reflex. He swiped along the edge of Hollis's ear, a thing Hollis had never done on purpose, and his knees involuntarily buckled. Walt caught him and stood again. He tilted Hollis's head back and clasped the full arch of his neck, drummed against the jut of his collarbone, then dragged his hands through Hollis's thin, limp brown hair. Everything about this was so horrifying and intense that it took Hollis a moment to notice his eyes were the wrong color. They were brown. Walt's eyes. Hollis's had always been green. Hollis stared at them hard. He had only ever seen Walt at night by street lamp with winter shadows crossing his face, or whoever's face that was. He'd thought it was strange for someone who was colored so light in every other way to have such dark eyes. In a wave of despair, he knew it would take a while for anyone in his life to notice. His green wasn't bright. It was close enough to brown, but Hollis knew his own face in a change was a change. Mercifully, Walt let him lean them back a bit closer to look. Walt's eyes were honey brown and had a dark ring around the outside and a yellow one around the pupil. They made Hollis's face look sleepier, more serious, less fresh. The outside hadn't changed shape. Hollis couldn't tell what Walt looked like from this, how old he really was, or whether he had crow's feet. Hollis was so engrossed in this, he didn't realize that Walt was stripping off his clothes until his pants were on the ground, and Walt was using his arms to roll up his shirt. "Stop," he shrieked. "If you think I'm not taking a shower, you've got another think coming," Walt hissed. "Stop, please." Walt ignored him and rustled his shirt off his head. "Don't look at me." Walt stopped. "Everyone has a body, Hollis. Yours is fine. I won't look at it if you don't want me to, but I haven't showered in 3 weeks, and I just want to feel the water on my face." And that's it. Thank you so much for reading. Please follow me on Instagram at @Ancrum, and I'm also on Threads at the same.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next reader is Christy Climenhage. Christy Climenhage is the author of The Midnight Project, out from Poplar Press, Wolsack and Wynn from 2025. A member of the FFWA and CSFFA, she holds a collection of graduate degrees, a PhD and 2 masters, in international political economy, European administration, and social sciences from a past life as a social scientist, academic, and diplomat. Christy, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Today I'll be reading from my debut science fiction thriller, The Midnight Project, published by Poplar Press in 2025. And thanks also to my publisher for sponsoring a giveaway of this book today. The story takes place in a near future where the bees are dying. 2 disgraced engineers, Raina and Cedric, are best friends and business partners and run a small, bespoke reproductive assistance clinic. They're approached by a mysterious billionaire, Burton Sykes, who asks them to engineer humans to live in the ocean depths to escape ecological collapse on land. I'm going to start reading with the first chapter, and then I'll read an excerpt of the first meeting between Raina, Cedric, and Mr. Sykes. I held my breath and looked down into her face. Hope and desperation curled together in my chest. Her oh-so-human eyes opened, and we gazed at each other for the first time. It was a moment, but not the kind you're thinking of. My burst of pride was professional, not personal. My affection was ambition disguised. I was not seeking to be a mother. She only vaguely resembled a human infant. Her limbs, undulating and covered in lines of suckers, were barely recognizable as arms and legs, 6 long appendages and 2 more curling like hair at her temples. No question, her appearance was unsettling. Her head was surprisingly malleable. Her shoulders and torso wriggled alarmingly. Nothing about her encouraged cooing or cuddling. The crimson pattern that overlaid her soft pink tones shifted while I watched, and her body twitched. "Come on, sweet thing," I said and held her up. A tentacle taking on a bluish tinge touched my cheek. Startled, I jumped. "Well, look at you," I said, and then smiled and cooed anyway. "Please, please, please, please," whispered Cedric, willing her to live. He attached a tiny monitor, smaller than a postage stamp, to a tentacle, gently picked her up and tipped her into a large saltwater tank. "Let's hope this one survives." And with that, we turned to the next specimen. Cedric and I had sunk everything we had into the project, our reputations, our careers, our money, our future. There was a lot riding on the little deep-sea hybrids we were trying to brew up. Not that there was much of a future out there anyway, not since the bees. I'm getting ahead of myself, of course. If I'm going to tell the story, I should start at the beginning, and that would be much, much earlier. And then this next excerpt is from the meeting with Mr. Sykes. We provided reproductive services to people who could afford us. Our services were delicately close to that area where law and ethics slide into the gray. And while we were careful to remain on the right side of, well, right, we also employed a very talented lawyer to keep us out of trouble. As the niceties came to an end, instead of following our typical intake routine and detailing what had driven him to us, the interview took an unexpected turn. Instead of a quietly intimate chat about his desire for healthy children or brilliant children or a specific kind of triple set, he launched into an uncomfortably direct discussion about science and world events. "What do you know about transformation and adaptation?" Mr. Sykes asked. I know that transformation is a euphemism for the impact of species extinction on ecosystems. An adaptation is considered a successful response by an ecosystem to an extinction event, I replied. More tea? Our intake room was designed to be soothing. Pale blue walls, art smoothly abstract, and chair fabrics that echoed the wall's muted tones, along with a pristine and perfect white couch. It was meant to be cool yet inviting, to comfort jangled nerves, but our latest guest didn't appear to need soothing in the least. Instead, he seemed to take up the space, dominating my professional landscape. Wreathed in a halo of heirloom tobacco smoke, Mr. Sykes was intent on conducting a political interrogation. It was Cedric and I who were on the back foot, and I didn't like it. What do you think happened to the bees? He asked next. Cedric's eyes widened slightly, and he paused, waiting for me to answer. When I spoke, I did my best to sound forthright. It should have been perfectly clear to the pesticide team that if you alter the plant, you have to alter the bees at the same time, otherwise you kill the bees. This has always been true, but the pace of die-off means that there was no time for reverse engineering. Their genetic engineers seriously messed up. This was true, as far as it went. And what will happen now? Well, Trisector Mods, the company responsible, will reverse engineer the bees and they'll stop dying, or at least the modified ones will. Will it be enough? Enough for what? To avoid transformation. From the corner of my eye, I could see Cedric's hands whitening on his teacup, and I worried for the fine-bone china. Cedric knew I wouldn't be able to resist telling this stranger what I'd worried about daily for months. I doubt it. Maybe for some rich countries or communities, a few enclaves here and there who can acquire some modified bees, but whole continents may be wiped out. Why are we talking about this, Mr. Sykes? Are you seeking a genetic engineer's opinion on whether you should invest in Trisector Mods? They seem to have a monopoly on modified bees for now, but you can bet there'll be a lot of competitors. Plus, they'll probably fold under the lawsuits. They've already doomed half the planet. Cedric's teacup rattled. It was not, ironically, at the mention of half the planet becoming extinct. We read and watch the news like everyone. Plus, we had an insider's understanding not only of the critical role that bees play in the human food chain, but also of the genetic engineering that created the mess in the first place. That was a Class A cock-up if ever I'd seen one. And I cringed thinking of my own role in the disaster. Not that I could speak to that anyway. No, Cedric was worried that I was coming dangerously close to breaching the non-disclosure agreement I'd signed when I left the ag industry. And if I did that, they could shut us down in a heartbeat. Our little company, Regeneration, would lose its license, and I would be sued until I no longer had the right to use my own name, let alone practice as a licensed genetic engineer. You know more than most about it. Were you close to the team working on that? Oh, we had nothing to do with that. A lie, but only a little one. Our lawyer could turn it into a truth. Cedric looked ready to hurl his teacup at me to get me to shut up. Mr. Sykes must have known about the NDA and was deliberately baiting me. He took another drag of his cigarette and returned to the doomed planet. More than half, according to my calculations, plus, given the advances of the genetics industry and its ties to the military-industrial complex, the chances of a similar event occurring in the next 5 to 10 years is more than 35%. The likelihood of it happening in the next 20 years, just under 50%, and the chances of the next breach being intentional is just a little over 60%, 61.5, if you want to be precise. Cynic that I was, I should have been fretting over that too, but I'm a genetic engineer, not a politician or a security expert. Still, it's not every day I met someone with a dimmer view than me. Interesting. And in your considered opinion, Mr. Sykes, where does that leave us? He leaned in intently. It leaves us without a future. Inevitably. No matter what happens with the bees this year. And thank you very much. And just a reminder that we do have a giveaway of a book of the Midnight Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. That's great. Our final reader tonight is Angel Leal. Angel Leal is a Latina trans trans non-binary writer living in Texas. They're a 2025 Clarion West Fellow, a poetry editor for Other Side, and their previous work appears in Strange Horizons, Uncanny, The Deadlands, and elsewhere. You can find them on Blue Sky, yay, at angelvleal.bsky.social, and I'll put that in the chat for everyone. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. So, this story is an elegy to my deal, whose mysterious life I'm still piecing together. In my deal's old room, I'm looking for a book made of water. He used to keep it under his pillow and read from it a story full of storms and men made of sea foam. I noticed that I was never thirsty after he read to me. My stomach felt full, and I usually dreamed of drowning next to him in a grand shipwreck. But the book wasn't always made of water. For a few years, it was made of plants, thumbed together in a knot. That was when I started growing tomates in my sleep and waking up with seeds in my hands. I'd jump out of bed and run to him like a little fool. And in a flash, he would gather me up and listen to a child's musings, as though they were saint-like and wise, as if I was the poet of seeds. He followed me to the garden and obeyed my every wish of where to plant and where to tunnel his brown hands down. A little later in our life, the book seemed to be made of only paper. My deal still read it to me, but now it read like an impossible map. It named and displayed every face and bird and river he found as a boy in Mexico. It described intimate memories long dead in my deal, like when he saw his father crying behind the orange tree. Dio nudged me awake to show the tender illustration of his trembling father, as well as the long shadow cast by the tree and the number of fruits still hanging on it. The topography of the map was impressive, and I started to appreciate the thoughtful footnotes that filled us in whenever we were baffled. One note was particularly precious and useful to me. It was a lifelike sketch of a textile factory in Coahuila that had burned down. Crowds of workers were weeping in the street, and among them was a tall man with a unibrow and beautiful eyes. Papa, my tío said, and he squeezed my hand like a child with a fever. He told me how he was so young, no one told him anything real. It didn't make any sense why they were leaving for America, why they could abandon the land where he learned to dream, for a place where he would need English to live. Childhood was over. The map took the time to depict a place where Dio started to change and feel afraid of change. There was a little river where he once caught a fish with his bare hands. He tried for hours to do it again, but they slipped out and eluded him until he cried from frustration. The map noted that this failure would one day remind the boy of trying to learn English. My tío turned over in bed after we read that and said the room was too hot, and could I turn on the fan to max strength and let him sleep? I did, but when I slipped out, I stayed by the door and saw from an open sliver my lonely tío, still awake, obsessing over the marvelous map on his own. To be honest, my tío was the type of person who didn't understand the middle of life. He understood well the aching mountains of childhood, where all things are impossibly larger than you, and you are nobody, and you are nowhere near the land where work happens and marriage and love are expected. He understood too the solemnity and slowness of old age, the quiet ways people take away your responsibilities and cease to expect you to fall in love. But the middle of life, what many consider life, was a great and painful confusion to him. He avoided speaking of that era of his and eventually began to avoid me when I approached it myself. That was unfortunate because he was like a father by then. I'd follow his steps and his stories and his habits. I was even a bit reclusive myself. But What really connected us was our affection for the book under his pillow. What continued to move me about it was the way it aged with us, the way the book adapted to our needs. When we talked to each other less, for example, the book had more and more to say. One night when we hadn't spoken all day and I'd been staring at my reflection like I didn't like it, I slipped into his room for some reason he didn't ask me to leave. He almost smiled when he saw me, not exactly happily, but with the satisfaction of knowing what I wanted. He pulled the book out from under his pillow, and now it was covered in feathers. It looked like a kind of bird, like it might fly out of his hands. When he opened it, I saw at first pinned photographs of cardinals, and finally small moving images of my Theo in his wandering 30s. I saw his round brown face and sad blue eyes staring at the mouth of another man. It was a lovely man, with gentle lips and long eyelashes. They kissed in what looked like an eternal summer, over and over. My Theo was completely silent as I watched. Neither of us made eye contact. We both just looked down at the shifting images and saw young love explore the boundaries of need. He closed the book when my young Theo took his shirt off, and the suddenness made the book clap the air with red feathers. I didn't know what my own body needed, and I didn't understand what had happened to my Theo. Did an American boy break his heart, or did Catholicism break it? Had he ever kissed another man again? Had he ever kissed anyone again? I didn't know, but I didn't think so. The man I grew up with hardly left his room anymore. His dark brown walls were covered in crosses and the Virgin of Guadalupe. Near the end of his life, my Theo didn't read to me too much, but sometimes I read to him. I'd reach under his pillow when he was having a fitful sleep and find to my comfort and surprise that the book was beginning to attach itself to his bed. Now he slept on maps of his old country and unsent love letters. By his feet, I found poems about the sea, and by his shoulder, I found several failed attempts at rewriting them in English. Finally, when he had the strength to, he'd lift up his gray head, and invariably I would find seeds in his hair. A part of me wanted to instantly bury them in the garden, just to see what the strange plants my Theo kept in his memory. But I buried them instead in a little drawer, and only imagined what sweet fruits his body needed to remember. I have one last paragraph left, but I think I'm out of time.
Yeah, you're at time. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It gives us a teaser, right? Now we're all going to go read this immediately. I know I am anyway. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for everyone who came today.